This is week 7 now. Okay, so the route, so the route that we're going through is that in week 9 we've got our first test. Okay, so already on the page, hopefully you've seen there's a little green button that says Test 1 Guide. So I'll be updating that on a regular basis and telling you the kind of things that you need to be reading, and also lots and lots and lots of sample questions that are up to MSc level. So don't assume, even though it's an open book test, that you can walk in and answer. It will be quite challenging, and you'll be up against it for time, and the types of questions we'll ask, you'll have to be thinking on your feet. So the questions that we've got here should show you roughly the type of questions that we might answer in the test. Make sure you read all of the question and you've not missed out one little bit at the end. Often that happens with online tests. There's a bit at the end where you're asked for something and you forget about it and you don't answer it and you lose marks. The amount of marks that it's worth is so important. If something is worth 1 mark, then answer it and move on. Something is worth 10 marks, then make sure you put a little bit of detail. We're looking for 10 things roughly that answer the question. If you want to bullet point, that's fine, but bullet points sometimes don't give you the narrative. It's up to yourself. But if you want to do a quick brain dump of what you think and come back to it later, then please do so. So I'll have other sessions. Our Slack channel is open all of the time, and already people are asking questions around the test. We have a WebEx session every Tuesday evening at 6:30. So please ask if there's anything you're unsure about, and I can even produce presentations on little snippets of things. If you think across the whole class, then there is something that's not quite going in. Elliptic curve cryptography comes up a lot. Some people have got RSA, that's great. I want you all to get RSA and to be able to understand it, the basics, and for you to understand elliptic curve. So probably if there's one area that you probably need to get your thinking caps on, it's elliptic curve cryptography and elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. It's not difficult. When I discovered what it was doing, it was really like a flashbulb moment for it. Okay, so there's questions there. There's a sample exam question. There's 2 sample exam papers that you can maybe time yourself against, and I'll try and add more in there. The coursework is out, and I appreciate I haven't covered the next generation, what's on the landscape. Okay, so you are the creme de la creme of graduates, and we want you to go out and not just make all the same mistakes that we have just now. What we have is a hodgepodge of horrible systems that don't work. I can't trust any email. I have 40 years of email, and I still can't trust one email that I receive. I go to websites and it says this site is untrusted. So we want you to be thinking ahead and to be building systems that are fit for the 21st century. So the areas that we've picked off are the areas that we think are coming up. They might not all succeed, but some of them are current, some of them are in the next 5 to 10 years, and you should be building systems that have this type of thing as a foundation. So the 6 areas we've defined are zero knowledge proofs. They're there now. There's nothing to stop you from storing a random value for the user, for the password, and when Eve has a look at it, she has no clue about what the user's password is. Unfortunately, we still use hashing methods. It's a crazy world. And then you say, well, I salt it, as we've seen. Salt's nothing because it's the salt stored with the hash. And it's not too difficult to do a dictionary attack or a brute force because you have 1 terahashes per second, and really that knocks down anything. And everybody uses an uppercase first letter, and everybody uses a number at the end. And when asked to put another number, they just put the same number or 1, 2, 3, and so on. So Hashcat knows all that. So why are we still using passwords in this 21st century? Homomorphic encryption is a big area, and that's let's process encrypted values. So why can't I just send my tax returns with encrypted values and let the tax person operate on them, on encrypted values, and make some sort of sense of them, but to preserve my data? So homomorphic encryption allows you to be able to encrypt and still process. Unfortunately, it's a massive overhead, and you need a Z-series IBM computer to make it work, or a whole lot of GPUs just now. But that's not to say that next year homomorphic encryption will be the standard method that everyone uses. Then we've got lightweight cryptography. The AES and RSA can't really run on an RFID passive tag. So there is a great growth in what are called lightweight crypto. Methods that have smaller keys, that have smaller block sizes, and especially consume a lot less energy. Because on most IoT devices, the battery matters. If you're going to have to power up a device and do some crypto and send things back, then that's a lot of energy that you're actually wasting. So lightweight cryptography is the other one. And along with this, quantum computers are likely to happen in the next decade. If they come along, we need to increase our symmetric key sizes up to about 128 or so. So 128 is probably okay just now, but it's at risk. If you can, 256 AES keeps you safe from quantum computers. The biggest problem is that elliptic curve and RSA will be cracked. Shor showed that, and how easy it was to crack elliptic curve and RSA. Our core public key methods will be cracked. So there are new methods called quantum robust cryptography, and if you're interested in that area, then go and have a look in a few GitHubs. It's quite complex sometimes, but it can be good fun, because they're going back to the old telecoms days, the days of linear codes and so on. They are proven to be quantum robust. Then we have key distribution centers, big area. If you can find some code that might implement Kerberos or SRP, there's great protocols around that allow you to be able to generate keys in a trusted way without the horribleness of what we're going to do today around digital certificates. And then anything around blockchain, cryptocurrency, really interesting area is investigating cryptocurrency. If you could create a product tomorrow and you wanted to have $1 billion company, then I would say investigation of Bitcoin, transactions, money laundering, looking for criminal intent, and so on is a big area. So anything around blockchain, cryptocurrency would be good. And what we'd like you to do is to be able to investigate the current literature and methods, grab some GitHub code. You can cook your own crypto if you want, or you can write some code around it to make it all work. But we want you to investigate, get some things working, and validate. You validate first, and then you evaluate. So in the coursework, we want you to grab some GitHub code, make sure you reference it, or write your own if you want, and then validate that it's working okay, and then to evaluate it, such as the CPU performance, how long does it take, how much energy does it take up, and so on. And if you want, and there's been a few people already have had some really wacky ideas about some other areas. If you want another area that isn't there, then just give us a shout and we'll agree to it. It's your risk. We could cover, we have knowledge in all these areas, and if you got into, if you wanted advice, we give you advice there. But if you pick your own crypto crazy methods, then we might not be able to help you academically, which isn't a bad thing, actually. So if you feel that you think there's another area out there, interplanetary crypto or space satellites, who knows? So what you might want to do is to visit some GitHubs, have a look at some code, see if you can get your code downloaded, see if you can get it running, and get comfortable with it, and then hopefully understand the concepts behind it. So then the basic structure, would prefer if it was in LaTeX, would prefer if it was an overleaf. If it's an overleaf, you could share it with us and we can review if you want, but you can still do it as a Word document. Up to 15 pages should kind of look like a research paper if you can make it look like that. That'd be great. But it has an introduction, lit review, implementation, evaluation, conclusions, a standard research paper, a mini dissertation, if you could say. So it's getting you kind of prepped for what you'll do in your dissertation anyway, but a bit smaller. And it'll get you ready to do that academic review. The best way to find papers, it's up to you, but I just go to Google Scholar. I quickly find some good papers that are highly cited. So if we went to Google Scholar now, hopefully we'll be able to see some interesting papers, say for lightweight crypto. A good place to start is a review paper that reviews the field, that people have done some tests on lightweight crypto. NIST is a good place. It's not academic, but NIST approves standards, and they're looking at lightweight crypto just now and with a shortlist. Eventually we'll have an AES for crypto equivalent standard, but it's not quite there yet. So if we go to lightweight crypto, then, oh my goodness. So that's 103. It was published in 2007, so it's maybe a little bit old there. There's a new variation there. If you want the kind of newer ones, then they're there. And then you just move down and hopefully you'll be able to pick off a significant paper. So that paper there was cited 47 times. In fact, we'll try that one. So if we look, and we'll go for that, 47 times. The way I typically do it is I grab here, I use LaTeX, so I just grab the BibTeX contents, and then I just put that in my bib. It'll take a little while to get used to LaTeX. If you can do it, honestly, it's fantastic. For sharing, there's nothing like it, and for producing academic content, it really works. But you can obviously use EndNote, and you can use whatever format that you want for your references. It should be okay. So for the marking of it, 20% for the quality of the research you've undertaken. Don't just have theory and background, try to have a little bit of, this is the state of the art in the field, this is the state of the art in lightweight cryptography, this is the latest method, and this saves battery strength by 50% compared with this other method. 25% for the quality and clarity of your implementation. So that could be taking the code from GitHub and then taking little snippets of the code and trying to explain what that little bit of code actually does. Make sure you reference the source of the code. If you don't, it's assumed that it's your code. If you don't put a little reference around it, we assume that's your code, and then obviously you could be open that you've you've said this is your code and it's someone else's. So reference your diagrams that come in. Your figures should all be referenced if you've taken them from somewhere. If you're good at Visio, then get a little Visio diagram of your own in there. But make sure you reference everything, especially the GitHub sources of any code that you actually use. And then if you're innovative, you've just done something slightly different and better, and we'll give you 20% for the innovation that you've applied. All of the courseworks will be innovative in some sort of way, but there'll be a spectrum of that. Then 20% for this evaluation, running the code maybe on 2 different cloud platforms to see the difference in the speed or something, or really hammering it with a difficult task. And so on. If you have a GPU on your PlayStation, then why not use it for that? And then 15% for the references and presentation. Does anybody have any questions about that, what you need to do?
Is there a bit more of a breakdown for those sections on the marketing? Like what people would have to do?
Yeah, I can add that, what we're looking for. I appreciate it doesn't match exactly to the structure of your report, so it's a bit more about the overall feel of your research rather than sectionalize it. So I'll add a little bit more about that. There is a video. If you can't get to sleep at night, then there's a little video that you can watch again that introduces the coursework. And as I said, I'm on the Slack space, and if you have any questions at any given time about any of the topics, I will cover the topics, I promise, apart from, I'll cover them all when we look at future crypto. So I will come back to them. We've got to the end of the module to complete this, but I'd advise you now to have a look and be comfortable with your subject, and maybe just see if you can get some research papers that you could read. Any other questions?
Just clarify the actual hand-in date.
Clarify the hand-in date.
On the website, we had a discussion about this before.
Yeah. So it should be at the end of week 15. So the Friday of week 15 is the deadline. 12 o'clock at night, 11:15. But I might just extend it to the Monday to give you a weekend. So it's up to you if you think that the Fridays you want to have a weekend to do it. I could do it for the Monday. So if I can get some feedback on that, if anybody has any problems with me making it the Monday of week 16, then that's fine for me. If you can create a GitHub yourself, make it private and share it with me, that's a really cool way of me seeing your work, and it's you building your own GitHub anyway. But it's up to yourself. I'm not asking for GitHubs. I'm not asking for Overleaf and LaTeX and so on. It's just, it would make it easier for us if you did it with that approach. And I advise you, because of the way that you can easily synchronize the code, then it works very well. Any other questions? Good. Okay then, right. So let's do the most horrible thing in computer security. PKI, the worst area of computer security in terms of knowledge, understanding, its credibility. It's a real disaster area. So PKI, like it or not, is the core of security on the web and on a good deal of our infrastructure of the internet. But the knowledge of PKI and how it works is extremely poor. So even crypto teams working in banks struggle with some of the concepts involved in creating our PKI infrastructure. So I'm going to cover some of the basics, really the basics about what a digital certificate is, and then we'll look at how we use PKI and how we've developed this trust infrastructure. I see it as one of the easiest money-making exercises that's probably been created ever on the internet. It used to be for $100 you would get a digital certificate. And you say, whoa, $100? What have you just done to justify $100? Because all you have is a key pair and you provide some identity, your passport or something like that, or your driver license. Typically it's a utility bill. And how easy is it to modify a utility bill, a scan of one of your utility bills? And you get a digital certificate. And then it times out and nothing will work. So a single timeout and a digital certificate can bring your whole infrastructure. Do you know that the Microsoft Azure cloud was down for 1 day? I mean, think of the impact that has because somebody didn't update the certificate. It happened over Christmas in the US shutdown. All these government sites started to time out because there was no one there to update the certificates. So it's such an easy thing, but it's such a disaster area. And it's a disaster area because Google had to force the industry to change its approach. So in July of this year, Google told the whole world that they were going to mark sites as being insecure if they didn't have a valid certificate. They kept telling companies again and again and again that this was going to happen. And guess what happened in July and August? All these sites became unavailable. So Google have really said that they've had enough. This partial encryption of sites. Have you been to a site it's HTTP and then all of a sudden it goes HTTPS? What crazy person does that? So tell me the problem. So they say, oh, well, it happened on a UK government website. I think it was TV licensing, quite a high risk. Scammers and things like that would say your TV license needs updated, please go here. So on that site, at one time, there was no HTTPS. It took you to the place that you paid, and then it became HTTPS, and it was a tunnel. And they go, well, that's what we do. And I've seen posts on Twitter of companies saying, well, our payment bit is insecure. But tell me what the problem of that approach, of having a partial coverage of the certificate. Why is that a bad idea?
Because fake website looks like the
Yeah.
TV license.
Yeah. Yeah. So when the user is there, they have no idea if they're actually on a valid website or not. Okay, so the core of what we have on the web is really around here. It's to know that the certificate that we have is trusted in some sort of way. So we'll be doing SSL and TLS in a lot more detail next week. But for just now, we'll just see that a site has a valid certificate. And the valid certificate holds the public key of the company. Somewhere we've generated a key pair, and somewhere we create a certificate that has our key pair on it. And then what we do is that we extract, and we should never release this ever, and somewhere we generate our certificate and it has our public key on it. Next week we'll find out that we could use this public key to pass back a session key for our tunnel that we're creating. That's not good, as we'll find out, for various reasons. But that's the way that we send our public key. So how do we trust this key? Well, it's signed by somebody that we trust. In this case, I've signed it by Trent. The Trent Mega Corporation has trusted this certificate. And I trust Trent enough to have checked Bob, that Bob really is Bob, and all the details there are fine. But as we'll see, it's not too difficult to fake certificates to self-sign them. So they don't even have a trust of Bob. It's a trust of Trent. They have the trust of Bob. And can you trust Bob to identify himself? No, you can't. So that's the core of what we have. And Google said, look, enough is enough. Three-quarters of the internet are untrusted and don't have a tunnel. So anybody listening to your network packets can find out what you're doing. Anybody at the other end, anybody anywhere, and part of the communication can actually see what you're doing. So Google said that's finished. That's a wrong model. All sites in the future will have a valid certificate. If they don't, we'll mark them as insecure. So has anybody been to a site recently that's marked as insecure? No? Well, that's good. We'll move towards 100%. 100% of sites will actually be secure. So there we go. So there's one there. It's a bit difficult to see it, but you can see that Chrome is identifying this site here is insecure. So do you think the user's going to, what's the user going to do now?
Add the exceptions and use it anyway.
You will do that. A user on a mobile device will run a mile from that. So the user needs to see a little green thing at the top, and they won't. So I may be wrong, but I think technical people will add exception and then go into the site and see it.
Sorry, I think I missed something. So like, not all sites have a certificate. Like my site doesn't have a certificate yet. But I didn't get that. So like, what do you have to do to not have a certificate but not get that message?
So if you have an incorrect certificate on the site, if the name doesn't relate to what that, so we'll have a look to see what the problem is on this site. So it's an invalid certificate.
Oh, okay.
It's signed by, you can't see that. It's signed by the guarantee.org. This is capabilities. This is a healthcare site, and somebody has forgotten to ask for a certificate for that site. So a typical thing is a timeout of it. So if the certificate is timed out, then Chrome will say that this isn't correct. But the long-term aim is not to support HTTP anymore.
Wait, so because the guarantee.org isn't a proper CA, right? Is that the idea? The ticket hasn't expired yet.
The global sign is a CA.
Okay.
I'll explain that in a minute. So the trust chain is fine, but this certificate was assigned to the guarantee.
Oh, okay.
.org.
Sorry, I misread it. So it's the guarantee certificate and they put it on this.
Yeah.
They just took the certificate.
So it's a valid certificate, and everything's okay with it, I think. Yeah, see, its certificate is valid. It's got lots of things. It's actually the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce there. So I don't know why the common name differs so much, but you can see that Chrome and Firefox is also will also block. Few people use Edge or Internet Explorer anymore. Do you know how much of the market that Chrome has got just now? Yeah, about 80%. From a standing start where Internet Explorer had 90%, Internet Explorer has crashed. Edge came along, and now even Microsoft said that maybe, does anybody use Edge here?
They're going to start using Chromium, right?
Chrome, yeah.
Yeah, they're going to start using the engine so that
The
it's
engine.
compatible.
Yeah, and there's so much, for testing your JavaScript and so on, Chrome is the only one that really gives you that trueness when you're testing. But you can see I've got all the browsers here, so I could test it on all of them. But Chrome is the one that's really forcing the market just now and making sure that that we have that the world is moving towards proper digital certificates. So we'll come back on to that in a little minute, and we'll try and explain. Okay, so there's our, call it what you want, CIA, AAA, you name it, confidentiality, integrity, and do you know what the A is? Yeah, I always get it wrong. So I've been pulled up so many times on that availability. With that availability, you don't have C&I, you know that, yeah. You know that the first thing that you should do is make something resilient and available and then get the security right. So we need to make sure that we have proper authentication of our users and our devices. We have confidentiality, and that gives us our encryption, and we have some sort of integrity to make sure that everything is working okay. Those are our fundamental properties. So the problem that we have now is that we assume that the private key is signing things and providing the identity. How do we get the public key to Alice? And that's been a fundamental problem. And how do we tell that the message hasn't been tampered along the way and that Eve has changed the public key? I've put my public key on a website. How do I know that Eve hasn't came along and changed my public key so that she now takes over my identity? So we need some way to make sure that we can get the public key from Bob to Alice so that Eve can't get in between. And then who do we really trust on the internet? And that's the major problem that we have. Who's the god of the internet? Who controls? Who says that this is correct? And if they get hacked, who do we trust anymore? So there's been quite a few examples of, and this is the biggest scare on the internet, would be a major trust provider being hacked. Say Google. So if Google's private key was released onto the internet, then everything that Google had signed, all their software, all of the transactions and so on, wouldn't be trusted. And then in your company, you do hunt the things that have been signed by that organization. And it has happened that major companies have shut down their whole business for 2 or 3 days. I won't say exactly the company, but a major company with hundreds of thousands of employees shut down the company and looked for everything that was signed by this one company. So once your private key is in the wild, or the companies you deal with, if their private key has been released, then you can trust very little in your infrastructure, and you've got to try and get rid of everything. You've got to re-sign all your DLLs, you've got to update all your components, and it can make the whole thing collapse. So that's our infrastructure that we have there. Okay, so we've got lots of things that we sign for. We sign for users, devices, our data needs a signature and to be identified, and especially for our systems. So how much do we actually authenticate? And end-to-end authentication takes us from one end to the other. It authenticates the user to the service. Intermediate takes us as part of the infrastructure. So the device authenticates itself to the server. So which one of those is more secure? End-to-end or intermediate authentication? End-to-end, okay? So end-to-end, so if Eve sits here or here, she can listen to the conversation, she can find out, she can modify, because the tunnel is here to here, and we don't know if it's really Bob that's sitting here, and we don't know if it's the service that's sitting in there. So unfortunately, TLS and SSL are flawed because they just create a tunnel that goes from a device to a server, and then it's finished. When it pops itself back out here, it's back as unencrypted. So if possible, we need to move towards end-to-end encryption. But that can be bad for a corporate organization. Why? Why do we typically use this method in a company, but in WhatsApp and Telegram we use this one? What's the problem with this one?
Because in organizations, not everybody have individual devices. Actually, some devices are used by many people.
It could be, yeah. So that's, if you want to just authenticate devices, then that's fine. And the device is typically owned by a person, yeah. But what's the other problem with this type of thing? Well, if I've got an IDS sitting here, and I've got my firewall looking at traffic and things like that, I can't examine the traffic. So TLS and SSL is still flawed enough that you can create smart firewalls that actually have a heads up on the keys that are used and can actually break into the tunnel and have a look at it. End-to-end, the only two things that have the keys are the end user and the end service. And if you use elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, then the keys cannot be discovered at all. So intermediate authentication is useful sometimes. And then we can authenticate either one way. We authenticate the server to the user, or in something like PEEP for Wi-Fi, the user has a certificate and shows the certificate to the access point. Or we can have mutual authentication, where we can, it's EAP TLS is what we do. I mean, you never have the case that if you want to connect to Eduroam, you need a certificate, because it's just too difficult to actually do that. You get around that by having a username and a password and so on. And mutual authentication, both sides will pass their ID to each other, and they won't trust each other until they've mutually authenticated themselves. Either after they authenticate, they re-authenticate. So an attack is that the server gets kicked off. It used to happen with Wi-Fi, and Eve hijacks the session and then comes in. If Bob hasn't re-authenticated the connection, then he will be communicating with Eve, even though he thinks that it's still okay. So it's important that we re-authenticate and we continue to challenge each other. So there's lots of different ways that we authenticate ourselves to networks. Do you know what the latest biometrics is on the Samsung devices? Samsung 10, S10?
Ultrasonic.
What was it?
Ultrasonic.
Ultrasonic.
Fingerprint scanner is, can recognize blood flow or something.
Yeah.
Like this,
It's fantastic. Yeah, I must admit, I'm a big fingerprint recognition fan. One of the reasons I didn't buy an Apple was because it didn't have a fingerprint scanner. I find it more natural if I'm making a payment. Unfortunately, the Android Google Pay isn't as good as the Apple Pay, which does do proper biometrics with it. But I'm a fan of fingerprints. Out of the methods, who trusts fingerprints the most? If you're making a payment, it's only me. Is it? 2, 3. Face? None. Who doesn't trust payments on a phone? Anyway, the rest of you, yeah. Okay. Actually, palm is an amazing thing. The problem with fingerprints, do you know what the problem fingerprints are? Like in a corporate environment.
You leave copies everywhere.
You leave copies, yeah. So have you seen the demos? I've had it done to my iPad. If you look, you can actually see where people have pressed. You can pick up the PIN number. It's not a hygienic thing. In a hospital, the last thing you want is to be using fingerprint scanning to get into wards and stuff like that, because hospitals are kind of a cesspit of disease. So actually, hand, if you can do it passively, and you can get the trust of the user, people don't mind their hand being looked at, and the lines in your hand are fairly distinctive. People don't quite like retina scans. I don't know about you, but there's something, if you have to peer into an ATM and look at it, and they scan your eyes, and you can see the infrareds or the red light, and there's something a bit scary about that. These days though, they can look at your eye, your retinas from afar. So the cameras now are so efficient in an airport, say, they can actually still look. You'll find in airports, you're delayed in some places. Your face is being scanned. They don't have to track you with the tickets anymore. They know exactly where you are and who you are, and can scan through the airport. Does anybody know how the face recognition system works on an Apple device? No. There's really great things on.
It's a combination of retina scan and a full 3D model of
Yeah.
entire head, I guess.
Yeah.
Because when you first authenticate, you need to provide a full scan.
Yeah.
of the face.
And that just the image gives you the 2D, but they fire infrared dots all around your face, and they can pick up a 3D model of your face. So there's many ways that we can authenticate, and obviously machines dumbly still use MAC addresses and IP addresses and so on, domain names for their authentication. But we can take it down even to the point of having a DNA scan of someone. If it's a highly secure environment, they can now get it down to less than a few minutes for a DNA sample to be taken. Okay, and what we've got to do is to make sure that we authenticate ourselves in lots of different ways. So it's usually something that you are, something that you have, and something that you know. Unfortunately, too many systems stick here. If you're creating an authentication system with multi-factor authentication, you should be taking one from each of these. In fact, just make it a PIN number. A PIN number with a phone and biometrics is infinitely more secure than a 15-character password. If you bring in location, somewhere you are, then you have a much more secure system than depending upon one specific thing there. And digital certificates are often used as to define something that you have. Okay, so the method that we use to be able to distribute our certificates, our keys, is with a digital certificate. And as I said, they're one of the least understood things in computer science. They're like a little magic thing that kind of happens and nobody really knows what they're doing, but it works. So if you see the little green thing and you know your site's got HTTPS, you go, yeah, that's good. But then underneath you might find that you've got Freak and Logjam and Beast, and we'll cover this in more detail next week. So don't just think because you've got a certificate on your site that everything is wonderful. You would make sure that your crypto that we're using was secure. So we have our digital certificates, which is a way for us to get some trust into the infrastructure. So when we look at our certificate, we see our basic details that we've got, who issued it, and this is what the user would see. And underneath, when we look at the certificates, this is a Windows output here, we see our public key. In this case, it's a 2000-bit RSA key that we have. There's the public key in there. And then a core part of this is who issued it, because they've got to be part of our trust chain. We don't trust a certificate unless we trust the issuer. And then each certificate has a thumbprint in the SHA-1 in this case. Very few certificates now have SHA-1, as I'll explain in a little minute, but the thumbprint makes sure that nobody has changed the certificate after it's been created. So there's two certificates that you have. When you buy one, or if you get one free from who gives free certificates? Let's Encrypt, yeah. So when you buy one or you get a free one, then you have your certificate, which you shouldn't distribute, and that gets stored away. Unbelievably, how is it protected? A password. So you're taking these wonderful keys that are uncrackable, and if you put QWERTY123 on it, you're kind of stuffed, okay? So it's the first thing that an intruder might look for is the certificates. They'll do a quick scan to see if they can find your certificate, your key pairs, and from there they can cause a lot of damage. So the certificate we see here is the public key, and it's only the public key that we're exposing. There are so many examples of developers releasing these guys. The recent one was it Superfish on Lenovo laptops. So you know you get bloatware when you buy a laptop. Bloatware is they can sell the laptop cheaper if they put a whole lot of software on it. Unfortunately, there was a package on it that broke the Google connection. So rather than going to Google, it went to this other site which did a quick scan of what you were looking for, and then the results from Google that came back, they would modify. It's a standard man-in-the-middle type attack. Unfortunately, the development company put the certificates onto the machines, onto the Lenovo laptop. And do you know how long it took them to crack? 1 minute. So with a digital certificate scanner, and it was the name of the company who created this software was the password. 1 minute. So no fancy cracking systems and so on. 1 minute and they had that, which meant that anybody with a Lenovo laptop who was in a cafe would have their communications viewed, because you now have released your private key. So any communication that you now have with your laptop is now broken. I can show you a demo next week of how Wireshark gets these keys, and you drop the key in and Wireshark reveals your SSL stream unencrypted. So Wireshark can do this quite easily if it has the keys that you've provided it with. And I'll give you a demo of that next week. So the different formats that we have. So we have a PB7 format, which looks like our base64. So we've seen this already with our keys. This is how we get a certificate. It says begin certificate and end certificate. We paste that into our router, we paste it into our systems and so on. It's an easy way for us to be able to transport. So from there, we import, and then on the output, we get these different formats here. If we want to put a password onto the certificate, we store it in a PFX or a P12 format. We'll do that in the lab today, and we'll do a little hash. We'll do a certificate cracker in Python, and all we do is that we just keep trying the certificate with different passwords, and it doesn't produce an exception, and you found it. So crypto kind of gives away the game by you trying the passwords on the certificate, and if you don't get an exception, then you've actually found it. So those are the core formats in there, and we would typically import it into our machine. Maybe after the break I'll show you the Mac store. The Mac store, unbelievably, there's been a few apps that I've had that managed to get themselves in as a root signer. I don't know how it happens, but some companies just stick themselves in, and they now want to sign everything on the machine. So you've got to watch the warnings that come in. If the warning says that this isn't trusted, don't add it. If it says that this is now a root signer, don't ever trust that. A root signer that gets into your machine can do lots of damage. Okay, so this is how it all kind of works. Bob wants to send Alice some secure communications. She sends over her public key to Bob. Bob will encrypt, and then Alice's private key will then decrypt that in the end. That's pure public key encryption for securing the message. We now want to prove Bob to Alice. So Bob now takes a hash of the message and signs with his private key. And then he sends that over. Alice takes a hash of the message too, and then decrypts the hash that Bob has created with which key? Bob's public key. So Bob sends over his public key in an email or something in a digital certificate. She looks at it and it looks okay, so she takes the public key off and she can prove that it was Bob that actually sent it. But what happens if Bob gets hacked? What happens if Bob loses his key? And that's the big problem with PKI. How are we going to revoke it? How are we now going to say that this isn't right anymore? It's going to take hours, days, years for the internet to learn that this certificate, although it looks right, isn't valid. So the whole revocation process is a difficult area. So there's my site there. I had to buy it from GoDaddy. And my certificate is there. We can see exactly what the details are. So how do we get the certificate onto the site in the first place from the trusted source? So how do we get Trent? First thing that we do is that we create a key pair. So standard, it's a 2K RSA key. You can stick with RSA if you want. If you want to go with a 4K RSA key, then that's fine. But many companies are thinking about elliptic curve. 160-bit keys is the same size, a lot smaller, and hopefully you've seen it doesn't scale. So then what you do is you use OpenSSL to create your your key signing request. And with this, we create an output ia.csr from that. That takes our keys, and then we'll output them. We send that to our root CA. Does anybody know a good root CA? This may be a leading question. The answer is no, that's not true. Does anybody know a good one that you trust? Apart from Let's Encrypt. See, that's the problem with this. VeriSign, Komodo, GoDaddy, so on, are root signers. So we send that through. They use OpenSSL. So this is costing you $80 to do this, to run OpenSSL, say. They go and then they add their key. So they now have to apply their key to be able to sign that certificate. So Trent now has to take the certificate that's creating, take their own private key, I've not got Trent's, and sign this certificate. On your computer, there will be a public key that relates to Trent's public key. On my Mac, it's probably got VeriSign's public key on it, and Microsoft's, and Google's, and so on. That's burnt into your operating system. You shouldn't be able to change that, and hopefully it'll get updated. So then the root CA will then use its keys to sign the certificate, and then Alice will then be able to verify that this was signed by Trent. So we'll do this in the lab today, so don't worry, we'll do it practically. But this is how you create your code signing request. So,
what exactly is the root CA signing? What does that prove? I understand it's encrypting something with a private key, and then you can use the public key of the OS to verify. But what is it?
I'll explain that in a little minute. I'll explain the hierarchy of the different signers in a little minute. So one company came along and said, this is crazy. I don't understand the business model here. You're asking $80 for a 1-year certificate, and all you're doing is running a few commands, and you're checking a utility bill. This is crazy business. And then, and are these companies actually secure? Is VeriSign highly secure that their keys won't get hacked? You can't tell that yourselves, because you can't see if they've got good practices for storing their key. Because a hack of VeriSign would wipe out your company if you have all your certificates in VeriSign. You would have to shut your company down, because no systems will actually work without the certificates. So Let's Encrypt came along, and Let's Encrypt said, we'll do it for free. We'll have a GitHub, it'll be open source. You download the GitHub code, and you get yourself a certificate. Unfortunately, it is the place that scammers go to for a certificate. So the advice I used to give on TV was that make sure you see the green bar at the top. I don't give that advice anymore to users in the email. Though you see the green bar, still don't trust. It could be signed by a malicious website. BAways.com was a good example. BAways.com for the BA hack was a proper signed certificate that they bought, and it was taking off credit card details from the BA site. So they've managed to get themselves into the infrastructure and even into the root signing. So they can now root sign their certificates. Okay, so that's the basic mechanism that we have, and this is the structure of trust. This is the chain of how all this, the hierarchy of the internet, really works. At the very top, we have our trusted root CAs. They are the gods of the internet, and what they say goes. So we're in big trouble if they ever get hacked. So Bob goes to root CA and says, look, I want a certificate. He proves his identity to them, and they issue it. At the same time, Alice has that certificate installed from the root CA on her machine. That root CA contains the public key of the entity, which is the roots, such as Google or Microsoft and so on. And she verifies the certificate by checking the signature on the root CA. Unfortunately, Eve can easily trick the trusted CA by saying, I'm Bob, I'm Bobby. So I've managed to get certificates that say Billy Buchanan, Bill Buchanan, William J. Buchanan, and so on. I once got rejected by saying, your name is Bill Buchanan, and you've said William. And I says, well, that's a name that we have in the UK. Look at Bill Gates. William Gates is his real name, and Bill, that's... so you can actually bounce back and forward, and it's not too difficult to get a trusted certificate, and it looks valid as far as Eve is concerned. So that's the root. So the root certificates are in your machine, and you don't want anybody to get into the root because these are trusted signers. A hacker and Eve will try to get a certificate in there. Once it's in, then her nasty software that has backdoor Microsoft DLLs and so on will look as if they've been signed. So a standard way that a hacker can take over your machine is to get in and to become a trusted signer of everything. Then in between we have intermediate CAs that are trusted to sign just one or two things. So a Cisco VPN certificate would only be trusted for a VPN connection and wouldn't be trusted to sign emails and so on. So these become intermediates and they're defined as what they can sign. So in this case, the Microsoft driver can sign for devices that connect. You do know that this device here, don't trust. If you have a Mac or a device here, so this is you're connecting a networked device. This isn't just a power socket. If somebody puts a backdoor into your power supply, I don't know if you've seen it online, but people can actually put a backdoor thing into your power supply. You're plugging that into your machine, and this is like a network connection in here that also has power. Luckily, there's a new standard evolving that will properly sign power supplies and any devices that connect into your laptop. So just watch whenever you plug your phone into a charger in an airport that there might be something on the other end. I can give you a few examples maybe next week on that. And then the last one is horrendous. It's self-signed. It's basically saying that I prove myself and should never be trusted. When I send references for students, I sign it myself, and they think that's actually trusted. So self-signed certificates should never really be trusted. So let's have a look at a few, and as the creme de la creme of computer science students, see if you can tell if these are real or valid or not valid certificates. Forget the timeout date from it. So just ignore the date on it. Is that real or fake? What do you think? What? Probably fake. Why? Issued by VeriSign? Yeah. It's true. Oh. So it goes right after VeriSign, and we can prove it. Look at your chain. The chain proves it. So with my code here, let me see if I can find if I can find Okay, so this is a typical tool that we use, OpenSSL S client to connect to a website. We connect, and hopefully when we connect, this is what we get back, and there's the chain defined. So that's the chain that your machine is checking that it maps onto a trusted infrastructure, and there. There's the issuer here, and DigiCert Cloud. That's from the Microsoft site for the signer there. So this one, forget the date. Real or fake? Fake. Why is it fake? Yeah, that's right. So self-signed user will get that message and just wants to get into eBay or e-commerce. Yeah.
So that other one was like signin.ebay.com. Do you need the domain name is eBay? The domain is eBay, and then the host name is the signin.ebay. Do you need a cert for every single different host, or?
I'll come back onto that. Yeah. Wildcard domains are horrible. Don't do it. There are organisations that I know that are quite close that do that.
Does Google do that?
Google do that. Well, you kind of half trust Google. Yeah. Okay, so that one. You were preempting this question.
Sorry, what do you say is the validation range for a digital certificate to be? Could it be a long period of time?
It can be a zillion years in the future. I've seen ones that are 2051. I don't ever trust a certificate to last that long. 2 to 3 years is about the amount of time that you would trust. So it can be any time from there. This one, real or fake? Real, yeah. So this is a star one, a wild card, and it's actually true because it's a global sign in them. So I'm quickly going to go through, and then we'll have a break, I promise, what happens here, okay? So very quickly, there's Bob and Alice, there's the colour keys. You see how much effort I go into producing these things, all colour-coded and things like that, okay? So we're going to quickly go through what happens in there. So Bob, Alice sends over our public key in a certificate signed from Trent. She then, Bob writes a message with his signature, usually a hash. He takes his signature and then signs it with his private key. He'll then take that whole lot and then encrypt it with Alice's public key. That's then sent over. What key does Alice now use to read the message? Her private key. Okay, she uses her private key. So what she does is she takes her certificate, which has got the 2 keys on it, and pops off the private key. She has the message. Now she has an encrypted version of Bob's hash. So which key should she now use to be able to read that hash or that signature? Bob's public key. So Bob sends over his public key there. She then takes that off, and then she checks Trent, of course, and then she checks that the signatures are actually the same. So she's now proven Bob. So that's the way that it all works. We take a hash, we take an encrypted hash of the message, we take Alice's public key, we send it over, we then take Alice's private key. This is the way that PGP encryption works. She takes off that encrypted message, she hashes it herself, she decrypts Bob's version, she checks the 2 of them together, and everything's fine. So that's the way that it kind of all works. It's that private key bit that really works. So what we'll do after the break is I'll give you some real demos of some car crashes. And so if you have a break for 5 minutes, we'll start up in 5 minutes' time. Thank you. I'll go into this in a lot more detail next week. So Google isn't the only show in town when it comes to searching for things. Shodan shows you much more about the services that are operating in a company, and SSL Labs produce an excellent scanning tool that you should be using before somebody else uses it. The good thing with Shodan and SSL Labs is that you're not actually scanning a site. So I advise you never to scan a running site with any, even a ping can be seen as malicious. Certainly an Nmap looks a bit strange, and you could end up in a lot of trouble. Even to scan your own neighbouring Wi-Fi and so on, I wouldn't advise it. The advantage of using SSL Labs and also Shodan is that the scan is done by someone else and cannot be traced back to you. And there are open tools that everybody knows about, so you'll see them coming in and scanning your own site. That's people interested in what you've got. So the scan itself, and I explain this in much more detail. So the scan is amazing in that it gives you a whole lot of information on the site that will look at. It will give you the full details of the certificate and whether it's valid or not, and whether it should be trusted. In this case, this site gets a T rating. A T isn't even an F. Anything that's C, C+, D, E, F, fix it. You have no excuses. This isn't even getting to the point of applying what are called X-frame headers for enhanced security. You need to get an A here for your site. So this gains a T in the scan. So I'll let you see a scan running live here. So on the front page, you'll actually see the most recent scans and the codes that they got here. So link9.net got an A+, which is excellent. You only get an A+ if you have what are called X-frame headers. You stop code injection and all the bad things that you see, like iframe injection and so on. Only the best sites get an A+. To get an A means that at least you have all your crypto working right. It doesn't support SSL2 and all that kind of stuff in there. So you can see that there's the A's, there's the B's, and there's an F graded site. I think 13 million sites on the internet, 13 million get an F grade, which means that they are running crypto which can be cracked. So in this case, this has a robot attack in it. It supports RC4. It uses 64-bit block ciphers of DES. It doesn't have the forward secrecy and so on. So you need to fix things. All the red protocols define the problems that it has. And then it'll tell you which operating systems are affected by kicking off a certain protocol. You'll often find some companies justify why they're still running SSL 3 or 2 because they have Windows users with unpatched systems. That just isn't the case. For a lot of these systems, somebody would be having to run Windows 3.1 on an unpatched Internet Explorer for it not to support TLS 1.0 as a default. If you are worried, then you log on your website the number of people that come in with Windows 3.1 using unpatched Internet Explorer 3. So from here, you can actually tell by getting rid of a certain protocol which devices will actually be kicked off your system. But sometimes users have to be educated by improving the devices and patching their systems. If you don't, you're allowing people to come in with unpatched browsers into your site. Okay, so we'll go into a lot more detail next week on how that actually works. But often it's just a matter of identifying your weak areas and then overcoming them. So next week we'll run a little Python script. So rather than running a GUI, which is time consuming, we'll run our Python script next week, and we'll have a list of our sites and we'll do a scan. That's the way that you would normally work in a production environment. You might scan your own site once a week just to make sure that it hasn't actually changed. To see what good looks like, then we've got to go to an A+ site. So that's our A+ site there. And both of these sites are getting A+. And you can see here that it is using TLS 1.3. So again, TLS 1.2, well, I'll explain this next week, the difference between TLS 1.2 and 1.3. But if your site can support it, upgrade to TLS 1.3. Most of the modern browsers are now supporting it. So why don't you just try it as an experiment and then kick off 1.0, 1.2 and so on. It's using the latest X-Frame headers as the HTTPS, STS and so on. And you'll see that it's a clean site, that it's not even supporting TLS 1.1 anymore. It's kicked. You cannot connect to this site with a TLS 1.1 because 1.1 has problems. It uses the best crypto. It's using AES and it's using Cha-Cha-20. It's using GCM. It's not using ECB and things like that. And you can see it's green all over, and that this is the range of browsers that it supports, and they're all clean. There is no risk to Windows XP unpatched browsers and so on. And you can see here all the way it gets an A+ for it. Okay, so it's not a difficult thing to do, and unfortunately many companies still struggle with it. So the key things we look for is Beast, Logjam, these types of threats. Allow an intruder to pull your website down low enough to break the security. So with things like Logjam, you can push your RSA security down to 512-bit keys for the Diffie-Hellman, and then you'll release the keys for your site. These sites that get A+, there is no downgrade because there's nothing to grab onto that's weak. For a downgrade attack, we've got to have the low-lying fruit. And we'll see next week when we look at it, we negotiate a cipher suite and we define what's required on our site. And if we have a few crypto methods which are weak, then intruder comes in and picks those ones and then can crack our the tunnels that we've created and also the certificate. So it's a problem area, and you've really got to be scanning here. So as I said, the ones that are getting the T have a problem with the site because the domain name doesn't match what's on the certificate. So if we try this one, so hopefully it's an okay site to connect to. It might not even let me connect to it. No, that one's not working. But I showed you one earlier where you have an incorrect name of the certificate against the site. Oh, it is there. Okay, so straight away you can see there's a problem in connecting, that it's saying it's not secure. It'll say it's not secure. Do you know any other reason why it'll say it's not secure? News sites, adult sites, betting sites are typically marked as insecure. Do you know why?
Because they're using content from other sites as well.
Yeah. So if you use a JavaScript from another site, or use content from another site, or especially if you use an iframe from another site, somebody can inject code into there. So it may be that this site actually has a problem in the, let's see what the problem is, if we can see it. There's some permissions. Well, it doesn't even have a certificate. That's its problem from there. Let's see if we can do that HTTPS. taken a long time to connect. But you can see the problems that we can have, and eventually browsers. Yeah.
Doesn't that SSL Labs then for all those F&T sites kind of for an attacker basically gives them a list of places to attack, like where to start?
Yeah. We'll see next week when we use our Python script. We don't have to go through the user interface anymore. We can run a Python script, and we can take a list of sites from somewhere and then run it through our Python script. We can have a multi-threaded program. We can run it across the cloud, and it's possible for us to scan thousands or millions of sites. And as you said, you might find the weak one. So we can see here that it has problems, and I don't know if we can find out what the problem is now, but our certificate here, it's not even letting me look at it. So it has a problem with the certificate. I don't know why I'm not getting that one to come up there, if we can see it, but that's our problem. So what does the internet actually look like in terms of its crypto? We'll go into this in more detail. So there are sites on the internet. This was a real site that I scanned. This is a site used by millions of citizens in the UK, and is a healthcare site. And when I scanned it, it still supported SSL 2. It was open to a 512-bit downgrade or freak attack, Poodle, man in the middle, and it did SSL 3. So this is a real public sector site which is used by millions of citizens. So if you do the scan, then about 60% of sites, and it's improving, get an A grade, down at 20 for a B grade, and then less than 10%. But around 10%, 9.8, are an F grade, which I think means about 13 million sites are getting an F. So that's not even a T grade here. In terms of what they support, unbelievably, there's still sites that are supporting well-known hacked SSL 2. 3 is still popular, but most sites are now supporting 1.1 and 1.2 TLS. For the forward secrecy, it's increasing the usage of it, and it's up at about 47% of the browsers are using forward secrecy, which means that there isn't a long-term hack of your keys. This guy's attack comes back again and again and again. It's not went away for 10 years, and it's still back in there. The latest one is a robot attack, and you can still see that there are some sites that are weak in terms. 0.6% are known to be open to attack from this robot. Poodle, again, it's improving, but not so bad. A lot of sites using RC4. Yeah, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah. And then I said earlier, what was very few certificates now use SHA-1. So Google broke SHA-1 by creating a collision between two PDF documents. It took them a year and a half on their massive Google cluster. So the industry has been told that they need to migrate away from SHA-1 signed certificates. The good thing is that very few sites, in fact 0, have SHA-1. So virtually every single site on the internet uses SHA-256 and above, with many now having SHA-256 from there.
So would that just be because the root CAs are requiring to have?
Yeah. So they just don't produce. So there just is no root certificates that providers that would provide SHA-1. They'd be negligent in doing that. So then there are other vulnerabilities. So in terms of the keys, so I said earlier that the starting point for keys was 2K RSA keys, and you can see here that over 91% of all the keys on the whole of the internet are 2002K keys. If you really want to push the boat out, you can go for 4K keys. That's typically banks. If you have a look at maybe Barclays Bank and so on, you'll find they're using 4K keys for their certificates, but only 6% are actually using that. And we'll go into that in more detail next week. The thing I wanted to cover, if I can remember, so that's our sites in there. That's fine. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll have our little quiz. If you could connect to that site, menti.com. I'll see how we get on. See how much went in. So it's menti.com, and then it's 86 22 78. So next week I'll go into a lot more detail into SSL, how it all works, and TLS. So this was just an introduction in terms of how we use our certificates, but the two are interlinked. You can't have SSL without your certificates. Okay, so you're all connected. 86 22 78. Good. Okay, so get yourself a name. Okay, so it's just what we went over. Okay. Yeah, it's really bad, isn't it? Do you want to connect to my phone? I wouldn't trust it. If anybody wants to connect to my phone, then they can. Edge Roam is really bad in here for some reason. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Everybody connected. What am I going to ask you about this one? Okay. Okay. Can I go now? That's great. Okay. So get ready. Here we go. What's the typical method used for digital certificate keys? AES, RSA, MD5, 3DES, or RC4? If you looked at your keys on your certificates, oh dear. So, not AES, that's symmetric key encryption, it's not public key encryption. 3DES is symmetric key encryption. RC4 is symmetric key encryption, okay? So, symmetric key encryption isn't public key encryption, okay? So I'm looking at the red faces here. I see a few. No, not giving away a lot there. Okay, so let's see how we got on there for that one. We won't look at the ones below here. I love Bill. That's definitely not going to win. That's for sure. FBI guy will be Hashberg. DPA, the GCHQ guy. Bill's private key, that's interesting. Does anybody know my private key? I think you probably do actually, but that's another story. So let's get the next one, just waiting for players. What's a typical, if you don't get this one, then I'm speaking to an open room, because I just say, I do know that it's Friday afternoon and it just kind of goes after a while. But what's a typical size of keys? Good. Oh dear. Okay, so RSA keys don't get out of bed until they get to 1K. Okay, don't go anywhere near anything that is 128, 256, 512 bits. No way. 1K, it's probably minimum, but as I just showed you, the whole of the internet is now on 2K keys. Nobody said 4K, which is good. Okay, so let's see how we got on there. And then it's will be FBI guy and Bill's private key, doing well there, good. And 0xFFF, that's a good one. So let's go to the third question. Third question, the website for HTTPS, which keys are contained in the digital certificate? It's a wee bit vague, I know. So when you connect to a website, which keys would you see? I think that's what I meant by that one. The public key of the website. Oh, well done. That's really good. So nobody said the symmetric key or the private key of the website. Good for you. The public key and the private key. I can see where you came from with that one. It was a bit vague, the question, so I do apologise. So the great thing about that question is that we've finally got to a point, I think, when the whole class kind of got a question right, which is an achievement, I think, maybe. So well done with that one. So Hashberg, FBI guy, was doing well in there. So it looks like FBI guy is good. So we've got an FBI guy coming in May to one of our conferences if you want to come along to it. Our Big Data and Cybersecurity conference in May if you want to see the FBI guy, a real FBI guy. They're really nice, actually, mostly, I think. Well, the public-facing side, probably. Bill's private key is doing well there. That's good. That's good. Hopefully it's a secure private key there. So the next one, who's not a digital certificate provider? That was a popular question earlier. Who's not? GeoTrust, GoDaddy, Network Solutions, Thaw, VeriSign, Trust Networks. What a horrible question that is. If you ask me, what does GoDaddy actually mean? It's just it's not a great name for a company, I wouldn't think. Haha, there you go. I tricked you. Network Solutions is a certificate provider, I think. You can check later and pull me up on this. So who got that one right? Who got that one right? Well, we're going to find out, so you can't hide. So we're going to find out who got that one right. FBI guy, I bet. No. Who's Mikuyudo? Good. Well, he admits. A university is all about the finest brains, so don't be shy. If you get something right, then you say, I got it right. You got it wrong. Okay, so that's question 5. Okay, so for question 5, Bob sends a message to Alice. Which key does he use to prove his identity? I know there's a vagueness in this one. I appreciate that, but fundamentally, which key is important to him? Which thing does he need that does prove? So there's probably 2 answers you're going to come up with here. No, there's 3 answers. It's not Alice's public key. That's for sure. Yes, his private key is the one that really does identify him. To the rest of the world, it's his public key. But fundamentally, he needs that private key for his identity to be defined. So DPA did well there. Will be is doing well. FBI guy not doing so well that time. And it's Hashberg. Who's Hashberg? Hashberg. Good. Well done. It's a kind of close one. This one. It's a close call. So Bob assigned the message. Which key does Alice use to prove his identity? Bob's public key, Bob's private key, Alice's public key, or Alice's private key? Which key does she use to prove that he is Bob? Yep, so it's Bob's public key. It's definitely, don't answer this in the exam question, because you'll get 0. You will definitely get 0. No matter what you say after it, you'll get 0. It doesn't go like that, by the way. So you don't just get 0 because you've got a really horrible, terrible answer. So everything that you say gets marked. So don't worry. I didn't mean what I just said there. I go, ah! And then, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So please strike that from what I just said. So even though you say something that really annoys, that's it. So it's definitely not Bob's private key. Don't ever give that away. Don't give it to Alice especially. Don't give it to Eve. Alice's public key, I can't even think about how that would work, but it's not that one. And nobody said Alice's private key, so that's a good, we're getting there. So I think, have we got one more question? Bill's private key is doing well. Yeah, babies is coming up in the rails there. Oh no, not so good. So it's still Hashberg. Question 7. We'll get there. We've still got 8 minutes, so we're okay. Okay, Trent has signed a certificate for Bob. Which key does Alice use to prove that Bob's certificate is valid? Bob's public key, Alice's private key, Alice's public key, Trent's private key, or Trent's public key? Which key does she prove that the certificate is really valid? It's a kind of fundamental thing from there. And it's Trent's public key. Trent should never give away his private key, ever, ever, ever. So think about the Lenovo hack whenever you answer that type of question. Don't ever let that happen where the keys are available. So we'll see who the winner is from there. And it is Hashberg. No, Jabot. I think maybe Hashberg is there. No, it's Shu. Another t-shirt for you. Oh, that was a grudging little clap there. Can I just show you my my certificate store system since we've got a few minutes? So let me find where security. There. Okay, so that I think the Mac's pretty good in terms of the way it keeps your keys. Apple is fairly trusted as a key provider, and the way that they actually set things up. Okay, so just let me try and have a wee look. Where am I? To look at for our certificates. Oops, that's not the right thing. From the Wi-Fi there. Well, I'll give you a demo next week of the certificates on the Mac. So thanks very much. We'll be in the lab in about 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll do some certificate scanning. Okay, thank you.